Point perspective train, you're going to need a pencil with an eraser, or a pencil and an eraser. You'll need a ruler or anything with a straight edge like a book or a folded up piece of paper, because you're going to need to make some straight lines. And whenever it is you are making lines that are straight, you should be using something to make them perfectly straight. Because if your lines are crooked or they're uneven, your train's going to look a little messy. The other thing you're going to want to keep in mind is while you're drawing, a lot of these lines are guidelines, so you're going to want to draw lightly. So I recommend using a regular number 2 pencil. I wouldn't recommend using the drawing pencil that I gave you guys, because it's really dark and it's not going to erase very well. So if you have one, just use a regular number 2 pencil and remember to draw lightly. So the first thing we're going to draw, and you're using the large drawing paper on this one, the first thing you're going to draw is your horizon line. Your horizon line is going to be 3 inches from the top of your paper. Now if you don't have a ruler, you can just kind of guess. You can use your fingers as a measuring tool. 2 fingers is about an inch, so if you do 2 fingers, 2 fingers, 2 fingers, that's approximately 3 inches. It's close enough. Now we're going to do a horizontal line here. So the best way to get a line that goes perfectly straight across is, there's 2 things you want to do. First, measure twice and mark it. So I'm going to mark it at 3 inches here, and I'm going to go over and I'm going to mark it at 3 inches here, and then I'm going to connect those lines. You can also, as an extra measure, line the edge of your ruler up with the edge of your paper. That ensures that you get a perfectly perpendicular line that goes straight across. But if you measure in 2 spots and mark it, and then draw along those 2 marks, that'll ensure that you're getting a line that goes perfectly straight across. It's parallel to the top of your paper. Because if I just measured it in 1 spot and then I was kind of guessing, is this straight or not? Okay, so there's our horizon line, and I'm just going to label it, but you don't have to write this on yours. Now I say for you to draw lightly. I'm drawing a little bit darker so it's easier for you to see. Okay, now the next thing we need is our vanishing point, and your vanishing point is going to be directly in the center of your paper. My paper is a little bit smaller than yours. I believe your paper is 12 inches across, so you mark it at the 6-inch mark. Mine is 11, so I'm marking mine at 5.5. But again, yours, just measure your paper and make sure you put your vanishing point directly in the center of your horizon line. Okay, next is, now we're going to start the train. You need the front of your train, which is going to go right about here. So first, what I want you to do is find the center of your paper. That's about 3 inches. Well, we'll go about 6 inches from the bottom. So I'm marking this. This is 6 inches from the bottom. I can kind of shift this so you can see better. Okay, here's the bottom of my paper. I measured 6 inches up, and I'm going to measure 5.5 inches over, because that's the center of my paper, and I pretty much already have it right there, right on the dot, right in the middle. So 6 inches up and 6 inches over for your paper, because your paper is 12 inches. And then you're going to make a circle here. So you just need to, if you have a compass, that would be good. If you don't have a compass, just find something that's round. So I have a pencil holder here. Let me move this. And I'm just going to try and get this centered as I can. It's important that you get this really centered, actually, because if you don't, then your train's going to be kind of going back at an angle. So one way to get this centered is, what I'll do is I'll measure the width of this pencil holder, which is 3.5 inches, and half of 3.5 is 2 3/4. No, 1 3/4. Okay, so there, I found my pencil holder needs to go from here to here. This is the same distance on either side. So what I did was I measured the width of my pencil holder it was 3.5 inches. I cut that in half and then put those half measurements on either side of my center dot there. And now if I line this up, here's one mark and here's the other mark. See if I can, it's a little blurry. Now I'll just trace this. Okay, so there is the front of my train. And it's perfectly centered. So again, try and get yours as perfectly centered as you can. Make sure you're using all the proper measurements. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line from the edge of my circle back to my vanishing point. Okay, so now it looks like you have like a cylinder going back into space. So this is the very front of the engine of the train. Now I'm going to measure 1.5 inches up above my circle here, and this is the back of the front of the engine compartment. And what I want to do here is kind of just, I want to mimic the curve here. If I put the pencil holder back on here, it wouldn't be quite right because this is slightly further away. And remember, things get smaller as they get further away. So ideally, I would need something round that's a little bit smaller. But really, I mean, you can just kind of eyeball it and make a curve here. Okay. So now where I said how you're going to be erasing a lot of lines, now I'm going to erase all this because I don't need these lines. Again, these were guidelines. So this is where if you were using a really dark pencil or if you pushed really hard, those lines aren't going to erase very well. Okay, next I'm going to draw the front of the engine compartment, so kind of like where the conductor of the train would sit. And this is going to basically be a box that comes up here. So to draw this box, it's important that you make this line go perfectly straight up and down. Because if it's slightly at an angle, the train's going to look like it's falling over. So to get this perfectly straight up and down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to line the edge of my ruler up down here with the edge of my paper. But I'm going to do it right here at this point. Now I have to move mine down. I don't have enough room here. So you can see, but I have it lined up at the bottom of my paper. And I'm going to go up about an inch, inch and a half. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Make sure you line the ruler up with the edge of your paper. It's always easy to put your pencil where you want to start making that line. Then push your ruler up to that pencil and then rotate the ruler and adjust it to where you need it to be before you make your line. And then I'm going to connect these straight across. Again, lining the edge of my ruler up with the edge of my paper. I'm going to put my pencil here, then push the ruler up to my pencil, line it up just right, and then make my line. Okay, so there's the front of the engine compartment. So this is where, you can decorate your train however you want, but this is basically where you would have like the windshield of your train. Okay, now I'm going to draw a line from these two top corners back to my vanishing point. And you can see, if you can kind of see your previous two lines that went back to your vanishing point, these are out a little bit further than those, which is why those ones you had to erase them. Okay, now what we're going to do is, so here's your engine compartment. We need to draw the back of the engine compartment, and then the first train car, and then the end of the first train car, and then the second train car, and then we're going to keep drawing these lines, but remember, with proportion, as things get further away, they get smaller. So the train cars are going to get smaller and smaller, and the gap in between each car is going to get smaller and smaller also. There's no necessary measurement for how far or wide you make these things. I kind of leave it up to you. So here I'm just going up a little bit over, like maybe 1.25 inches, and I made this line. I made sure that I lined up the edge of my ruler here with the edge of my paper so that line goes perfectly straight across. If that line was at an angle, it's just gonna look really messed up. Okay, so here's the top, here's the roof of my engine compartment, and then there's a gap, and then there's the first train car. So I'm gonna make another line. I've lined the edge of my ruler up here. I'm going up, you know, maybe 1/4 inch, and I'm making this line. Okay, so here's my first train car, and then I'm gonna, here's the roof, and then the first train car is gonna end right about here. I line the edge of my ruler up. I can't emphasize the importance of making sure that you're lining this up every time, because if you're not, it's gonna be really crooked. Okay, now I'm going to draw the next gap in between the train cars, but it should be a little bit smaller than this one because it's getting further away. Okay, and then here's the roof of the next train car, which should be smaller than this one. And then a slightly smaller gap. And then another roof. And I'm just going to do this all the way back and making these lines get closer and closer together until there's just like no room to draw any more lines. Eventually it's just going to be a bunch of lines stacked on top of each other. Okay. So now what you need to do is erase these lines in between each of the train cars. Because we need to redo this line straight up and down, because basically what these are a bunch of cubes stacked up behind each other. And in order to make this look like a cube, you have to move this line from the diagonal position that originally was in to straight up and down, like a vertical line. But it needs to go perfectly straight up and down. So in order to line this up perfectly straight up and down, first I'm going to put my pencil here, right here. I'm going to push my ruler up to my pencil, and I'm going to line the edge of my ruler up with the bottom of my paper, which you can't see because it's off the camera, but I assure you it is perfectly lined up, and that gives me my line that goes perfectly straight up and down. I'm going to do the same thing to this side, and then I'm going to do it to this one, and this one. I'm going to do it to every single one. My ruler's not long enough. So now I can line my ruler up with my horizon line. And these ones, they're so small. You can kind of freehand these ones. I won't tell. Okay, that's it. So now here's your train, your engine compartment, and all the subsequent train cars that are behind the train that go back off into to the caboose. All right. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is draw the cow catcher, and the cow catcher is the grill on the front of the train. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series of measurements to make it perfectly symmetrical and even all the way around. So first I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line it up with the edge of my paper here. I'm going to move it to where it looks pretty even on both sides. So I'm going to mark this on the ruler here and on the ruler here. I'll make these kind of big so you can see them. And you can position this kind of wherever you want. There's no right or wrong way to do this, and like in regards to like where you're positioning this. I mean, it should be below the top half of the front of this circle here. So I put my ruler here, lined it up, marked it, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to do that again, but I'm going to go out. So what I'm going to do is, I got to figure this out, because for you, because you have a 12-inch piece of paper, you can mark it at 3 and 9. But mine's slightly smaller, so I can't do that. I'm just going to eyeball it. Okay, and now I'm going to go now below the circle and mark it at the center, which the center of my paper was 5.5. Yours is 6. So I'm going to mark it right about here. And now you're just going to connect the dots. So this is just a basic shape of a cow catcher. You can stylize it a little bit more, make it flare out more, put spikes or however you want to do it. And then your cow catcher it's a grill, so it should be see-through. So what you're going to want to do is draw a series of lines within it to make it look like a grill, like a see-through grill. So what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of following the lines that I already have. And now what I'm going to do is do this. And again, you can do this in whatever style you want.
A few moments later.
I have kind of a fat eraser here and I'm erasing more than I need. Let's see. This didn't line up very well. You get the idea. Okay. Next, we need the train tracks. So to draw the train tracks, what you're going to do is you're going to take your pencil, put it on your vanishing point. Hopefully your ruler's long enough. As you can see, mine is not, because I need this to go all the way down. So I'll do this in 2 steps. I'm putting my pencil on my vanishing point, and I'm going to draw. You're going to draw rails that are coming out from under the train. The rails are a set of 2 lines, but they have to be coming from your vanishing point. That's one thing you have to remember when you're doing a 1-point perspective train. All your lines, most of your vertical lines, need to go back towards your vanishing point. So to do this, I'm putting my pencil on my vanishing point, I'm pushing my ruler up to my pencil, I'm positioning my ruler so it's going over the train, because the rails need to be underneath the train. So if I did it way out here, it really wouldn't make any sense. And I'm going to draw one line. Remember, your grill is see-through, so draw it through your grill. And I need to carry this all the way down. So what I'll do is I'll just reposition my ruler. I'm lining it up here and draw it all the way to the bottom. And your rails are 2 sets of lines. So I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to go out of that original line a little bit. And by making both of these lines coming out of the vanishing point, they both start right on top of each other, and as they get further away from the line, they get wider and further apart. So you should see a slight gap forming, getting wider and wider. So it should be, mine are really close together, but this measurement here should be wider than the measurement here, because the lines are getting closer and closer as they get back to that vanishing point. Okay, so there's one, and I'm going to do one on the other side. Trying to get it to line up with the other one as best as I can. Alright, so there's my rails. Now the next thing you need to do are the train ties, which are the wooden planks that the rails sit on. So it's going to be a bunch of pieces of wood that go back under the train. So to do those, you're going to need 2 guidelines that represent the outside of the pieces of wood. So again, these are guidelines, so draw these lightly. Okay, so the wood will go between these 2 lines but under the rails. So I'm just going to start at the bottom and do one down here. I'm going to line the edge of my ruler up with the edge of my paper so that I'm making sure that this line goes perfectly straight across. I'm not drawing it through my rails. And you can make the first one kind of wide. So here's the top of the wood. And to make this look three-dimensional, I'm going to draw the front of the wood. So if you have to imagine it's like a 2x4 piece of wood, and if it's laying down, you can see the top, the white part on the top, and then the part that's facing you is this little tiny short piece. So this might make a little bit more sense once I draw it. But so again, lining the ruler up with the edge of my paper, making this line perfectly straight across, and I went really short in between. Let's see if I can lift this so you can kind of see. And then, just like with the train cars, in order to make this look three-dimensional, these sidelines need to go perfectly straight up and down. Same thing applies for the wood, and it's such a small line, you can get away with just kind of freehanding it. And so now, this is the edge of my wood. That guideline will actually now turn into the edge of the piece of wood, and then this is the piece of wood here, which I can, draw some wood grain on here and try and make it look like a piece of wood. And then this is the front of the piece of wood, so if I had a slight shadow here to make it separate it from the top piece. Okay, so just to show you how that looks, and now you're gonna do these all the way back until they're under the train so you can't see them anymore. And again, just like with the train car, remember as things get further away they get smaller, so the width of the wood should also get smaller as you get further back. It's not going to get smaller by much because they're so close to each other. So I'm starting with the top piece. And then this piece here, the front piece, the little short piece here, and then redo these sidelines so they go perfectly straight up and down. Draw your wood grain. You don't really have to draw the wood grain with a pencil or shade it with the pencil, because ultimately you're going to be coloring these in, so the whole thing is going to be done with color pencil. Okay, so I'll do one more. Start with the little short one first. Redo these straight up and down. Draw my wood grain. Draw like a knot in the wood. Add that shadow to differentiate that front piece from the top piece. And you'll keep doing this. I could do another one here and then probably another one back here. So you'll do that all the way back. Then you can get rid of that initial guideline you made that represented the outside of this piece of wood, because they're not all one piece. So by doing this, it's separating them because they are each individual separate pieces of wood. Okay, now the two other things that are required for this assignment are for you to add a fence on one side and telephone poles on the other side. So to do a fence, we'll do that first. We'll do it on the right side. It doesn't matter which side you do either one of them on. But just like with the train tracks, you need two guidelines. One line represents the bottom of the fence and one line represents the top of the fence. So make these kind of close. You don't want these to be super tall. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw vertical lines, vertical pairs of lines in between these two guidelines, and they're going to get smaller and smaller as they get further and further away. So I'm going to start here. I'm lining the edge of my ruler up with the edge of my paper down here at the bottom of the screen. And this line is going to go perfectly straight up, and I'm going to do another one for the other side of the piece of wood. Okay, so there's one fence post. And I'm going to round these off. So to make these look cylindrical, I'm going to do a curved line that goes across like this, And on the top, I'm going to draw an oval representing the top of the fence post. So since anything below the horizon line, you can see the top of it. Anything above the horizon line, you can't see the top. So now that I've drawn one fence post, I can get rid of these extra guidelines. And hopefully you were drawing lightly so you can erase these. And if you do find that some of your lines aren't erasing very well, when you go back and color it with your color pencils, hopefully that'll kind of cover those up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to do my next fence post right about here, and I'm going to make it slightly skinnier than the first one because it's further away. And then I'll do the next one. I'll do the rest of them, and then I'll go back in and add the bottoms and the tops. Making sure I'm lining my ruler up at the bottom of my paper every time. And then my ruler's not long enough, so I'm going to use my horizon line. So these are going to get smaller, smaller, skinnier, skinnier, and closer together. Okay, now get rid of this line, this guideline, and the bottom guideline. And then round off the bottoms. So just a curve that kind of goes straight across, not an angle. I erased a little too much of the bottom of these off. I should have erased it afterwards. And then draw an oval on the top, an oval that goes straight across. And then get rid of all the extra lines you don't need. And then you can connect these fence posts a couple different ways. You could do like barbed wire, or you can just do more like a cross wires, or you can just do lines that go straight across. However you want to do that, I'll leave that up to you. You can even make it like a solid fence. And then for the next, you need to do the telephone poles. To do the telephone poles, you're going to do kind of very similar to the fence, where you're doing two guidelines that represent the bottom and the top of the telephone poles, except for the top guideline is going to go above the horizon line because the telephone poles are tall. So there are my two guidelines. You can see. And now I'm going to draw the telephone poles. Now since I'm drawing way up here, my ruler's too short, so I'm going to use the top of my paper to line my ruler up. Okay, so there's one telephone pole. Now you'll need to erase your horizon line since the telephone pole is not see-through. You do the same curved bottom like you did for the fence posts, but the top is going to curve up because you can't see the top because it's above the horizon line. And then you can get rid of the extra lines. So I'll do a couple more of these. These you don't have to do as many. They can be further away from each other. Just make sure that they're the second one and the third one are skinnier and slightly closer than the first one you did. Round these off. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of all the unneeded lines. The horizon line here and this guideline and the top guideline. Now the only other thing you need to do with the telephone poles is draw like the cross section. So use your ruler and so there's the part where the wire is going to be attached to. So let me do that to this one. So this one should be a little bit lower than the first one. And then this one is going to be like almost right on the horizon line. And then you can connect these with your kind of like a drooping wire. So say here's the little terminals where the wire's attached to. And then the line's going to go from, it's going to come off the paper from the other pole that's off the paper. Try and focus this a little better. Okay, so this line is going to go, since it's on the left side, it's going to go behind the pole and then connect to this one, and then down behind this pole and then connect to that one, and then down to infinity. And then this one comes from the front and it's going to go in front of this one and in front of this one and then to the vanishing point. And those are all the requirements that you have to do to your train drawing. So obviously the train, a cow catcher, you have to do train tracks and rails. You have to do a fence on one side. You have to do telephone poles on the other side. And then from here, this kind of gives you like a blank template to now use your imagination and make your train surrealistic. So, you know, look up some surreal images online, see what you can do to incorporate surreal images into your train. A couple other things, like if you wanted to do a smokestack here, you can add that. I'm just kind of quickly freehanding this. So this is where it's open, and this is a cylinder, so you want to shade it. And you know, when you're coloring your train, I'm shading with my pencil, but you'll do all your coloring and shading with your color pencils. But do color these things in so they look three-dimensional. You know, your fence posts are cylinders, so you guys know how to shade a cylinder, dark on either side and then light in the center so that it looks rounded. You know, and cast shadows, don't forget to add your cast shadows. Figure out where your light source is coming from. Where's your sun or moon or whatever kind of light source you're going to use to create shadows and make things look three-dimensional. And so with this train stack here where the smoke's going to come out, if you're going to do smoke, what I like to do is just kind of have it billow out to one side of the train and then back to your vanishing point. So it looks like it's kind of, gives the train more motion, kind of makes it look like the train's going back into space and looks like it's moving. And you know, if you're going to do you're making this look like smoke, you want to kind of shade it in a little bit and make it look billowy. And then if you want to do, you can add mountains in the background or whatever you want to do. What I don't want to see is a sun with lines coming out of it, okay? Because the sun, you know, last time I looked, it burned my eyes, but it doesn't really have lines coming out of it, so don't do that. You're trying to make this, you know, semi-realistic to the best of your ability by adding shadows and things, and if you go and add some, like a cartoon-looking sun, it's going to kind of throw it off a little bit. You know, feel free to add trees or houses. If you want to do a house quickly, without using a ruler, but if you do one, you're going to use a ruler. Now you should know how to do this because you did those cube worksheets, but basically you're drawing a cube coming out of your vanishing point. So just get the basic structure of a cube for a house, and then you can add your roof. Top of the roof should angle back towards the vanishing point. So here's your house, here's a roof, and then you want to do a door. Top of the door is going to angle back towards the vanishing point. You'll learn a little bit more about this when we get to the two-point perspective city drawing. And that's it.